Friday. Thank you for joining us for Just Ask TCI. This is for anyone who's not familiar with TCI, and I think everyone on this call absolutely knows all about us. The first thing I'll ask you is, don't care if you're in your pajamas still, that's fine. We love to see your face. This is intended to be informal, interactive. We thank you. And the dog, the cat, the child, whoever comes in the screen, Flora, you probably will have some students coming by and we'll meet them, right? We'll meet the students, your daughter's classmates. But this is intended to be informal. And we have been doing this. This is one of our first programs that, thank goodness, we at least knew about Zoom and used Zoom over 2.5 years ago. This program came about with the Knight Foundation grant, and they asked us to create something public facing. And I said, well, let's use Zoom. And here we are 2.5 years later. And I feel, well, I'm still learning Zoom every day and all that it can do and all the other platforms. I feel that at least we had some familiarity. So yes, yay, I'm happy about that. Anyhow, again, welcome. Anyone who is not familiar with the Commonwealth Institute, or this is your first time, we're a network of business and professional women, and we provide leadership development, high-level networking, and mentoring through our content-rich programs and events, programs such as this. We have 3 recurring monthly programs. We do leadership development programs. You name it, we do it, but the whole idea is that we're here to support women in business and advance women in leadership. Welcome again. Here's what this hour, and I'm a stickler on agenda, especially now that we're all in our lunchtime, what this is gonna look like. In a few minutes, I think I forgot to tell you who I am. I'm Lori K. Davis, the Executive Director of the Commonwealth Institute. I've now been here over 7 years and have the privilege of leading South Florida. And so back to TCI, the first question I always get asked is, why are you the Commonwealth Institute? This is South Florida. Quick story that we were founded in Boston, that's your first clue, by a woman who was one of the first women in the Boston area to take a home healthcare company public, our founder, Lois Silverman. And she's in Boston, and she also lived on One Commonwealth Avenue, where she formed the very first executive forum with 8 businesswomen, brought them into her living room on One Commonwealth Avenue, and they helped guide her through this process of taking a company public. And that was in 1997, and here we are in 2021, virtually in each other's living rooms, offices, or wherever you might be. So thank you for joining us. We're gonna go around and just do a brief, really brief, just tell us your name, your title and company you work with, so that our experts, Flora and Rebecca, kind of have a feel for who's on the call. And then I'm going to turn it over to Flora, and Rebecca are both shareholders at Greenberg. They're going to spend a little more time introducing themselves. I really want you to get to know them. Flora is on our board. Rebecca's in one of our executive forums, but more than that, they've got great expertise, and we're going to learn a lot from them today. But this is interactive, so format-wise, I'll start with Rebecca, because D is first, and this is the only way I keep track with the first question, and then I'll go to Flora, and I'll reverse that order. Keep me on track, Jessica. I'll reverse that order with the next question. We do encourage you, if you have some thoughts to add, we want to hear from you. Don't be shy. Unmute yourself. You can use your raise the hand, or you can do this, and I'll be looking and watching too to make sure I see you all. So introductions, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca and Flora. We're going to go question by question, and as time, you guys, please involve yourself. Gail, I don't see you there. Please introduce yourself, and then we'll turn it over to Flora and Rebecca.
Okay, well, I'm Gail Carson, and I'm known as the SOB, the Spunky Old Broad, and that's my website. And I work with women 50 plus, and I do 12 radio shows a month with 3 different genres, and just got notified that I've got 10,000 downloads on my podcast, so that's great.
Amazing, congratulations.
Thank you. Oh,
So
and
again,
also, I guess I'm a forum facilitator for the not-for-profit group and chair of the forum facilitators. That's it.
so welcome again, everyone. And I do suspect we'll have some people still jumping in during the lunch hour, but this is Just Ask TCI. And this month's topic is effective negotiation. And we had some questions that were submitted. And again, informal, so please feel free to add to the responses, ask more questions in whatever means works for you. And comment in the chat. So anyhow, I'll let you guys, whoever wants to go first, this is Rebecca DiStefano and Flora Perez, my wonderful board member and shareholder, Greenberg Traurig. You guys are up. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and then we'll launch into our questions.
Sure, this is Rebecca. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Yesterday, I did a few of these Zoom meetings yesterday. I was having a little trouble with the equipment, so that's good to hear. So, hey everybody. Wanted to thank Lori Kay for inviting me today. I've been a part of the TCI community for, I don't know how long it's been now. I think it's been about 3 or 4 years that I've been part of the executive forum for Palm Beach County. Been a lawyer for 20 years and with GT going on 13 of those years as a shareholder in South Florida. And I primarily am a corporate lawyer, capital markets attorney, mergers and acquisitions attorney, and get involved in a lot of really diverse matters. So I started out my career with the thought that I wanted to jump into as many things as I could because I wanted to be very diverse, because I have a lifelong love of learning. So that's just a little bit about me. Let me flip it over to Flora.
Hi. So you'll see dates got moved around and I actually brought my daughter to Tallahassee. She's starting FSU on Monday. Today was move-in day. Although that sounds like it would be inconvenient for you, for me, it was a pleasure to have to leave that room for an hour to get away from the massive negotiation on what has to go and what can stay, because you can imagine it's a much tinier room than we all envisioned. But happy to be here. As Lori said, I'm a shareholder at Greenberg Traurig. I've been a lawyer for 23 years, like Rebecca, do capital markets, corporate, M&A. I've done that my whole career. I was in-house for 13 years, so know a little bit about corporate America as well. I was at Ryder System and started as a manager actually, and made my way up to VP and Deputy General Counsel. So in that role, did a lot of different things, always managed the corporate function, but was able to extend out a little bit on compliance and HR, all within legal, but in a lot of other areas of law. So I did that for a while, and then I've been back at Greenberg for about 5 years as a shareholder. And again, sort of more back on the purely corporate side. And so hopefully, I always say on negotiation, we certainly, Rebecca and I do that for a living, but it still can be challenging when we do it personally. And so, we're just here to give you some of the things we've learned in our years of doing it, both professionally and personally. And we're still continuing to learn and learning from each other, but hopefully some of the things we've picked up will be helpful to you.
I'm certain they will be helpful. But again, that's why we're all sitting here together and why we're involved in TCI and just in supporting one another and helping one another grow in so many ways. First question, and Rebecca, just to keep me in line, I'll start with you. What are the must-ask questions in any negotiation?
So I'll just start out with, when I thought about this question, everything really is a negotiation in life of sorts. And so I guess there are so many different aspects on different situations where we negotiate, but I'm assuming everyone here is probably either a negotiation within their company for a relationship, a long-term relationship, a short-term relationship, or something related to perhaps negotiating salary. That's something that we've talked about a lot at TCI Forum, is negotiating your own salary if you're making a transition or a job change. So those in that context, I would say the way I approach every negotiation, even with my family members, is to ask a lot of really open-ended questions at the outset of the conversation. And, you know, what I usually start out with is some kind of icebreaker conversation, just to gain some rapport with the person on the other side of the table that I'm talking to, and try to get to know that person a little bit better. I mean, there are different ways to approach how you're going to negotiate, whether it's in person, and we're doing less of that now, and we're doing more by phone and by email. But I usually like to start out with a phone call rather than having everything just on paper through email. And I also like in person. But I will say, everybody is going to have their own negotiating style, what works for you the best, and there's not a one size fits all to negotiation, is what I learned over the years. I just try to watch the people that I really admired and that I was learning from, and my mentors, and see what was really working for the negotiation. And then I sort of collected some questions and collected some styles that became my own style. But for me, I am more of a listener, so I'll ask questions about at the very beginning, and I'm pretty direct, but I do want to have that social aspect to find out what people's interests are, find out where they're from. So some of the first questions would be, you know, where are you from? If I don't know that person, where did you grow up? You know, maybe some small talk around that to get the person talking, to just put some context and figure out, who am I really talking to? What matters to this person? And I think women are particularly good in negotiation this way. Not just women. I mean, honestly, there's been a lot of men too who are really great at the small talk and the chatter at the beginning. Finding out where the person's from, you know, maybe you visited that place, and those are some of the first questions that I ask. But I think listening to the person and what they're actually saying is very important, just in the information gathering phase. And then, so moving into the actual substantive negotiation, I'm pretty upfront. This is my style. I'd love to hear what Flora thinks about this, but I just ask the person, you know, what are the most important points to them, and can they put the important terms to them into writing and send to me. This is, of course, at the end of the call. I want to know what's important to them. What you end up in writing is what's most important, and I think that's where your focus should be. But the more conversational the negotiation is, I think, or that first conversation is, the better. And I just do a lot of listening, so that's kind of general. I'd love to hear what Flora thinks in terms of some of the questions that she has.
Flora, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rebecca's spot on. I think a big goal of the discussion when you're negotiating is to really force the party to really to really make those decisions, to really put on the record, as you say. I mean, I don't know about in writing, especially if it's informal, but really put on the record, make clear the things that they're most concerned about, or the things that they really want to get out of the negotiation. And so, to the extent that you can ask the broader question and that doesn't work very well, I think you go to the specifics. And part of my answer to question 2 on how to prepare is going to be about really understanding your priorities, and trying to understand, at least, you're putting yourself in the shoes of who you're dealing with and what you think their priority is going to be. And so to the extent that you've done that background, you can ask more specific questions like, is it important to you, if it's we always talk about salary negotiations, but for us, if it's a project that you want, you can ask specifically, what are you looking for? What are you looking to achieve with the project? And if, you get sketchy answers, that's when you really need to ask more specific questions. Is it someone who, has this experience? Is it someone who has, so you can really force them. Sometimes they're being obtuse, but a lot of times people haven't thought through it that carefully. And your conversations and your negotiations can really, to the extent that hasn't been formulated, really push them in the direction that will lead them to answers that are favorable to you, that are really going to help you in the negotiation. And so I think on the very key points as to what's important to them and the things that you think should be important to them, those are where you should direct a lot of the questions and try and guide the conversation to the extent you can.
Which leads us, and you started on that, to our second question. So the audience knows the question. It's, how do I prepare for what I know will be a difficult negotiation? Best tips and techniques for effective negotiation, and I think in particular related to a difficult negotiation.
I'm sorry if it's noisy. I tried to find the quietest place. There's not a lot of quiet places on campus.
I'm not hearing it, Flora, just so you know.
Oh, great. So perfect. So, I think, I assume by difficult negotiation is someone that is, either is difficult or you have an uphill battle in terms of what you want, and you sort of realize that either way, preparation is key. And, sometimes these quote negotiations happen, spontaneously. Sometimes you prepare for them. And so either way, though, if you know that something is coming or there's a conversation to be had that needs to be negotiated, you should always be thinking about, again, sort of the things that really matter to you, because sometimes we can get drawn into negotiation for negotiation's sake and talk about things and negotiate points that are really not that important to us. And so you really need to know what am I really want to get out of this? What is the most important goal? And it can't be 10. You have to know you're not getting 10 things you want. You're getting the things that are most important. And if you really are thoughtful about that and mindful about that, you're going to be able to really drive the conversation to the points that you want. And so preparing by knowing really what's important to you and what you want to get out of it, and your backup, negotiation, you have what you really want and what you'll take and what you'll never take, and being very clear in your mind about that, I think, is very important. And then alternatively, I think understanding your audience, both, their goals, their style, their personality, theirs and the people who are making the decision. Hopefully you're talking to people who are making decisions, but sometimes it's a multi-step process. And so you need to understand the person you're dealing with, but you also need to understand the person that they're going to have to deal with, and the questions that they're going to have to answer, and be able to answer them in a way that, again, gets you at the end what those one or two, end results you want. So I think that the preparation sounds like a lot. It shouldn't be, but it can be, but it's really worth the effort, because I think it in spades, it helps drive the conversation you want to have. And a lot of the questions are about, difficult conversations or difficult people, or, people trying to, throw you off. And I think that being grounded in that and the things you thought about and know, I think is a huge benefit, and really helps through difficult conversations, because you don't get swayed by the difficulty of it so much. So I think those are my sort of key in terms of just preparing for negotiations. Rebecca, you want to add anything?
I mean, you really covered it. I mean, what you said that really, Flora, resonates with me is the preparation. I am famous for kind of over preparing because I want to be able to walk in with all the confidence in the world. So for me, it's psychological, a lot of it. And I want to know that I've gotten every single data point that I can, that I'm walking into the room with that. So my approach for difficult negotiation is I'm really trying to have as much informational leverage as possible. So I'm as smart as possible on every aspect of whatever it is. If it's an industry that I don't really know that well, I'm going to ask a lot of questions and do some research on that. If it has something to do with quantities and I don't know what the quantities really are, I'll call someone in the industry who can give me just a little bit of information on that. I might even make 2 calls. if I know it's going to be excessively difficult, I try to think about how many meetings do I really think this is going to take to get to the point that we're going to have an agreement. And if I know that it's a lease, say for my family, I know that that could go on for months. So I don't put too much pressure on that first meeting. I think about, okay, you know, I want to find out what's important to this other party, figure out what's outline in the first meeting, what's important to me, and then kind of set a timeline and talk to the other party about, you know, I think we can be able to get this done in X amount of days. And even I might even follow up with an email. We have these issues for our next meeting. Let's talk about a resolution to these issues, and perhaps set a second meeting. So I just try to manage it by knowledge and by having more information than the other party potentially, because there is a little bit of a competitive aspect to this. I mean, in all honesty. And then I try to manage a timeline and set some reasonable expectations about how long it'll take to get back to this person. You know, I don't ever want them to think that I'm not getting back to them because I have lost interest, or I don't think we're working to a conclusion. So if I can't get back to them for, say, 10 days, I'm like, I'm really sorry, but I'm completely tied up on a deal. I'm not going to be able to get back to you. So I try to help them understand I'm very interested in getting this done. So I just try to manage it as much as possible in terms of timeline and goals and the information that I have and bring to the table. And then I also try to think about what's the right time of the day. I really get very detailed with this, honestly. The best time of day for me is early morning, because frankly, I just feel like people think really well in the morning. Not everybody's a morning person. The other members of my family are not. I like to do things early morning. And then pre-COVID, you know, I always thought it was nice to get together with a cup of coffee, just to have some personal interaction and have that aspect of it, but not always. It just depends. Sometimes I feel like with other parties, it's better just to be on the phone and not even meet the person. It depends.
Thank you. I'm going to combine 3 and 9 because they're very similar, or one leads to the other. It's the same issue. The first part of this is my staff doesn't want to return to the office. Where do I even start with this potentially emotional negotiation? And then the other part to that, and it's someone else's question, how can a company resolve internal conflict about whether to require everyone to come back to the office despite COVID-19? Some members of management feel very strongly that the company is becoming too virtual and the team is no longer connected. How do you negotiate a solution where there are two very strong factions that have already stated their positions clearly and repeatedly? So clearly it all ties back to, you know, return to some want to be in the office and some don't. And it's highly charged. And Rebecca, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Lori. I mean, it is highly charged, and all companies in America are working through this right now, and really all over the world, and you know, as well as our firm. And so, I mean, it's a great question. This one has to be handled, you know, it's in terms of emotionally. I think you have to think about the parties who have fear about coming back to work and are really scared, and then you've got to think about the other side of this, management, who needs everybody back into the office. And so the way I've seen this handled, that I think is really a great, in terms of a great tool for this, is to sort of initiate some conversations from everyone, including staff, you know, from management on down, as to, you know, what their concerns are, surveys. I know that at least some of the companies I've talked to, you know, they've had one-on-one talks, Zoom meetings, to get people to kind of express what their concerns were, as well as what they thought about coming back, you know, 1 or 2 days a week in shift work. And So there's a couple of approaches. I think you could start out with a conversation through a survey, which could be confidential, to get the really where people are not filtered and they tell you what they're really concerned about. And you might find out that there's a lot of people who, maybe they're concerned about an underlying health condition. And so that's a really valid concern that has legal ramifications for if you have, say, someone with diabetes who, if they were infected, their health could really be seriously more in jeopardy than someone else. That person, could be legally protected under the American Disabilities Act. So there are legal aspects to this too, as well as just coming back to work, and having a mandate that we're going to come back. So I mean, I've seen companies have an integrated approach in terms of phases, and I think that that's working really well to find out who wants to come back right away and give that employee that option, and then find out who has concerns about coming back, and those people who are kind of, in the middle in terms of, maybe they can come back part of the time, but maybe they can't come back all the time because they've got kids at home and they don't have daycare, they don't have, their kids aren't back in school. So there are just a lot of different considerations, and I think the conversation needs to be more in terms of gathering the data from everyone in your organization about what they feel comfortable doing. And that makes the whole organization feel more cared for, I think. And it also gives, it gives a human element to management by soliciting some feedback first and then getting a little bit of buy-in. And then at that point, I think you have to set a timeline for, okay, this may change because we have more waves of the virus and we have to shift gears, but everybody, we're going to be really nimble, and we're going to allow you, if you need to stay home, and you can actually do your job at home, you can do that. But on the other hand, there are certain people that need to be in the office. Who are those people, and can they come back part-time, and can they come back into a safe environment? But I mean, the emphasis is making sure the workplace is safe, because there are now a lot of lawsuits around people who have come back and maybe their office wasn't OSHA compliant. I lost my train of thought there. And then there's just, and then at some point you have to have, I guess, you've got to have management be able to say, this is our time frame for getting at least 50% of the workforce back to the office. But it really depends. We're just in the middle of this now, and we're just getting it figured out. But I think the key is flexibility, and key is being, really quite nimble with the organization's legal, knowing exactly what the guidelines are under OSHA for safety, as well as codes of conduct and codes of ethics. So I'll stop there. I did a lot of talking.
Yeah. Thank you. And then after Flora, if you want to add, I have a question from the audience that I'd like to ask along this same thing. So Flora, you're up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, separate from the whole legal issues, I think Rebecca hit on, from my perspective, a big point. There's times in a negotiation where you really need buy-in from the person you're negotiating with, from a long-term, perspective, with whatever the end result is. And there are times when you don't. And this is certainly one of those times where making people feel part of the process, and getting, some level of buy-in or understanding or collaboration is key. And so when you're negotiating with those things in mind, I think it requires obviously much more listening, but it also requires really trying to make sure that people understand all of the issues. I think when we're dealing with employees, they're very familiar, and as are most people, with the issues with returning to work, the safety issues, the logistics with children. There's some common things that we all really resonate with. I think the thing sometimes that employees don't understand, or what is the harm in not coming into the office? What effect is that having on the business? And making them feel part of what those issues are makes them part of what some of the solutions are. And so I think they need to really understand management's perspective in terms of what is impacting the business negatively as a result. Nobody's fault. It's what we have to deal with. But over the long term, if there are negative things, we have to really try and articulate those better than saying we're getting too virtual. Like, what does that mean? If it's really that important that we really want people to return, we really need to be able to articulate what we're losing and what the impact of that is over even the longer term. So it's not like, it has to be tomorrow. There maybe isn't a huge sense of urgency, but you start getting people's head around the issues that it's causing the business, which are really issues for employees too. I mean, if employees feel part of the business, obviously that's where their livelihood, but not just that, it's a place that they're motivated by and want to see succeed, then I think really, trying to get them involved in what those issues, the business's issues are with the remote, so that you can move towards, trying to find a solution that addresses both sets of issues as best as you can. And then I think it makes the conversations easier and more collaborative. It's like what we were saying about management, which I get too. I'm sure, Greenberg, there's a lot of discussions about people who think we should all come back and people think no one should come back. And then everyone just stares at each other, and that's not a good negotiation, right? The discussion needs to be about understanding each other's points, validating each other's points. And that is just step one. So we understand, all of those are issues. Now, how do we move to a solution that kind of addresses that? And then wherever you land, you have some sense of buy-in because the right people, were involved in that decision and it wasn't pushed down. So really forcing people to validate all of the issues it creates all around. And then, prioritizing them. For a long time, safety was key and most important, and so everyone stayed home and businesses made those decisions. And as we move towards, if the safety issues, if we all agree they're as bad, then maybe we stay there. But really having those discussions that are more based on, not superficial, but really digging in to where we are and the impact, I think is key and will help drive some of those decisions that will need to be made at some point.
So around this issue, the COVID and employees returning to work, I have a question that was submitted now. Would an employee be legally protected if they did not have any underlying health condition, but someone in their household does have an underlying health condition? So the employee is fearful to go to the office. Do we have any law or any legalese around that yet? Maybe not.
I don't know of any law.
Rebecca.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was just.
No, I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know any law around it yet, but I think that. So, for example, some of you might know that my son has type 1 diabetes, and so for me, I'm concerned about bringing something home. And by the way, I come into the office all the time, but I understand that concern about having someone, I think there could be some negligence claim that could be made. But again, I don't think it's been addressed yet in the law, and I don't have a real good, it may be a little attenuated, but I think there could be, some concerns that I would have about, do I have to go into an unsafe situation if that means that I come home and, I've got someone at home who, could be, could be infected by me. And I can't get tested every day, certainly. So, I think it's a very good question, but I don't think it's been addressed yet.
Yeah, I think that we're learning and laws are coming out as we go along too, from a legal perspective. This is also new. Okay, our next question, and Rebecca, I think it's your turn and to start first. And if I'm off, just go ahead and start wherever you want. Again, informal. How do you handle it when someone is attacking you for things you're not actually doing and stating, either in emails or verbally in front of others, as fact, something that isn't accurate? This seems to be part of their negotiation strategy.
Oh, that's a tough one. Because unfortunately, you may not be dealing with someone who is reasonable if they're attacking you personally. So that's going to be a difficult negotiation. But unfortunately, in the workplace and in other areas of life, I think that that's how some people negotiate, is through personal attacks. So, but the way I would think of this as turn it around to understand that if someone is resorting to a personal attack related to something that's not even truthful or accurate, they have a lot of weaknesses, apparently. If they're addressing a negotiation this way. So what I would do in that situation is I would seek to clear up the record right away, because no one will be helped by a distortion of facts. And furthermore, if this is happening in the workplace, it could become a legal matter in terms of you don't want any inaccurate facts on the record that could be harmful to the organization as a whole, especially if it's someone who's been accused who's, at the top of management. So that's harmful both to you personally, you professionally. It's harmful to the organization. So what I would do, if anything has been sent by email, I would work to correct the record with the facts right away and swiftly, because as everybody knows, email never goes away and sometimes can show up in documents later. So if it turned into a larger issue, you want to correct the facts right away, and you want to move that party. I think you just have to call the party out and move to a more appropriate discussion of what are the facts here and what are we really negotiating, and try to steer things back onto what's appropriate as far as the facts and what's being negotiated. So, I mean, my style personally would not, I would not be passive. It's easier said than done, but I would just go ahead and address it pretty swiftly and move things back on track if possible. And there's probably politics involved with that. And I think it's important not to be passive.
Flora.
Yes. No, I mean, I think that's well said. I think, if the attack, when someone really crosses the line, and I think it's difficult to engage, but, if the attacks are about facts or issues that are really irrelevant to the negotiation, which often is what happens, they're trying to deflect. I think you need to sort of rise above and don't try and spend too much time arguing about things that don't matter, whether they're true or not. You can sort of make the statement they're not true, but let's assume they are. Let's move past that, because that's not what's important here. And what's important is we need to talk about A, B, and C. Because I think a lot of times when that happens, it's not really that relevant to the negotiation. And so don't get drawn into a whole discussion about things that were said that aren't actually true if they're not that important anyway in terms of where you want to get to. Because that just, I think, is just a technique that people use, and you'll just sort of fall into it. If it is critical, I mean, if what they're saying is close to the heart of what you're trying to negotiate or is key to the outcome, then I think, you need to, like Rebecca said, I think you need to, in the best way you can, sort of hit those inaccuracies head on.
Great, thank you. So, Flora, we'll start with you on the next question. I've heard both ways shown. Whoops, go ahead.
I forget people don't know the question. Go ahead.
Yeah. And actually this is probably something that maybe for future we send the questions out in advance. Because they're too big to put in the chat, to copy and paste there. Oh, actually we could question my question. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Yeah, but both ways, but good thought. Next question. I've heard both ways shown below as best practices in negotiation. I'm interested in hearing your opinions on this topic. The first method, be first to throw out a number so that you're anchoring the discussion and setting an expectation first. 2, don't negotiate against yourself by throwing out a number first. Let the other side do it first. What do you think is better, or there are situations that may dictate which one?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. I think negotiation strategy like I said, you always be prepared, always know what you want, always have run down what the other person wants in your own mind. But strategy, how you employ that is going to really depend, I think, on two key things. I think the first is how strongly you feel about the things you really want, how much information you have about what the other person is going to negotiate or what their position is, and the personality really of the person and the you know, sort of style and personality of the person that you're negotiating with. And so there's not one answer. I can assure you that the one method of negotiating is not going to be helpful. You really need to negotiate specifically with the person you're dealing with, and that might be a completely different strategy than the next 5 people you'll have to deal with, because it's so important to really involve them in the negotiation, have them be engaged, lead them where you want to lead them, and just people are very different, and so you really have to be cognizant and planning for that. So there are times, I think, when you feel very strongly about, in my mind, when you feel very strongly about the things you want, you need to be on the front end of that. How you communicate that is going to depend on the style and personality of the person you deal with, right? You have to be thinking about what speaks to them, what are they going to be most receptive to in terms of how I present my case. But if there's something you really feel very strongly about, coming out the gate with those things, I think sends the message that you want to send. You know, if you don't have a lot of you're unsure and you need more information to understand sort of where you really want to come out on something, or understand more where the other person does, then I think you play more of the game where you ask a lot of questions, you know, at the outset, and you know, trying to send the message that you're more open about the discussions. You have stuff to learn that are going to feed into how you feel about the outcome or what outcome you want, so that it's more of a discussion and less of a, you know, really sending a message. I think that's when you're not sure, there's no reason to always come out with a really strong position, because if you don't have one, then you don't want to be flip-flopping back and forth. You really want to get the information you need, have the discussions you need, and then as you have those, as you feel strongly, if you do, then you can express them. I think from a negotiating point of view, it's always most effective, I think, when people can really understand where you're coming from and really understand, you know, you're as clear as you can be about how you do this negotiation, and they're not always, again, aggressive or assertive or passive. It really is going to depend how strongly you feel, how important it is, the time you have for the outcome you need, and very important, you know, then how you communicate and the style you bring is really going to be a function of what will be most effective with who you're dealing with. And that, you know, some people say, I love when my daughter says, well, I am who I am, I can't change who I am, and I laugh. And I say, okay, well, you'll always be the person who gets what you want, you know, 25% of the time. That's fine if that's who you are then. Because, right, that's just not how it works. We're grown-ups, we're adults. Everybody's different. Our goal is to get where we want to get, and we aren't changing who we are. We are just trying to speak in a voice and in a manner that is going to be most effective and really communicate what we need, and that the person we're negotiating with is going to be able to listen and take it in. That's always to your advantage. And so that's what you're doing. You're sort of changing your style to be most effective in a particular situation, certainly not changing, you know, who you are. So that to me is, I hope that's an answer, because it's sometimes maybe like most lawyers, but I do think it's something that is part of the preparation, is thinking about what the strategy is going in.
Right. Thank you. Rebecca.
So, I mean, I think Flora really covered that. And I mean, I just love, you know, your answer, Flora, that it just depends. And, but I will say, I thought about this myself, and I am usually more likely to just put the numbers out there, because I have an aversion to spending a lot of time back and forth, and I would just rather know the counterparty. Again, this depends, but I'd rather the other party know where I stand. And so if it's important to me not to spend a lot of time on the negotiation, I'll just say, I'll give a range of quantities. And that's the way I get it started. I would say that's my approach 75-80% of the time. For this call, I'm sure everybody's thinking about a situation. I would say I would never throw out a number if I were interviewing for a job. In most cases, I would sort of come into it would depend on really what I was interviewing for. But in most cases, I would wait for the employer to give me a term sheet before I would say anything. And then I would never, if I were looking for a new position, talk about my prior compensation. I would not do that. That wasn't exactly the question, but it's a little bit of in context with throwing out the first number. And I would say in that case, I would not throw out a first number. And I would never tell a recruiter, I would never give a recruiter a number. If a recruiter calls you, I don't think anybody on this call would do this, but I would not provide any quantifiable data.
Great, thank you. In light of time, I want to skip to our second to last question, and I'm going to put it here. And we have tried to make these just asks of where COVID edition, so to speak, to help us get through some questions to COVID. So here it is, and I'm putting it in the chat right now. The public health crisis has created deep uncertainty among communities at all levels. Something I've noted is community mistrust. If negotiation relies on trust, relationship building, and open communication, what do you recommend are some fundamental tools in rebuilding that trust? This is in response to COVID-19, racial tensions locally and nationally, education systems, etc. And I think that's probably one of the very toughest questions that we had to ask. Who wants to take that one first?
I have to drop off right at once, so I will take the first and then leave you in Rebecca's capable hands. It's been a pleasure. I mean, this is a really difficult question. I think you're right in that negotiation, hopefully, in most times, comes from a place of trust or relationship building, open communication, because it is true, those are always the most effective. If those kind of fundamental things aren't there, it's very difficult for difficult issues to get anywhere because there's such a mistrust. I think, to me, the key is, authenticity and being very real about issues that are, very emotional and widespread. People have, varying opinions, which is typically a good thing. But I think, a lot of honesty and really taking a step back and being really upfront and communicative about where you're coming from is key. The issues that really bother you, sometimes it seems like in these days we're more afraid to give our opinions, and that's on both sides depending on the audience, and that shouldn't be how it is. We have differing opinions. Opinions can differ, but being really honest about why we feel the way we think, what we're worried about, what concerns us, what is important to us, even if it's not what's important to others. I think, saying those as opposed to sort of avoiding those difficult conversations are what's going to prevent us from bringing back sort of a lot of these tools. Is the fear of having really open dialogue about our individual, how we come to the table, what our backgrounds are, why we have the opinions we have. And so that we can have a discussion about solutions. And that, for whatever reason, has become more challenging than ever. And I think is just key to starting back on that process and rebuilding that trust, which I agree with whoever the question is extremely critical as a first step.
Great, thank you. And Rebecca, I'm going to let you wrap that up. And while you're speaking, I'm just going to put our mission vision statement, and if anyone our contact information, if anyone wants to reach out to us, and add that we're having a TCI talk on August 26th around it's reaching agreement without raising your voice. So look for that. Flora, if you have to jump off, thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You get to close with this really tough question.
Thank you, Flora. That was awesome. See you soon. I think that this is a great question, and I just think that everyone has to have a voice in this conversation, and there has to be the approach has to be we're starting from a point of respect, and we have to respect everyone's really opinions and feelings with respect to this topic. So as far as specific points, I think that it helps to set a tone at the top now with a mission statement. If the company doesn't have one, codes of value or codes of ethics, which do stress respect for everyone in these situations. I do think that one thing to think about is training for compliance purposes, and also to think about committees that are comprised of both management and employees, down to any employee, the employee working in the copy room, everyone having a voice in terms of this conversation. So, I mean, I think that developing your return to work plan, addressing all of these things, which have all happened during COVID crisis, I think it's important. And a statement of corporate values, I think, helps to set the tone at the top. But it's 100% about respect, and respecting every person and every level of the organization.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rebecca. And I know Flora's already had to leave us. And thank you all for joining us. We hope that you've learned. These conversations are going to continue on and on and on. But thank you for sharing your wisdom. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful weekend. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Rebecca. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.